Welcome to another Practice With Me video. This is the second video in a series exploring musical instrument practice and providing an opportunity for you to practice alongside another person, known as mirroring, which often has the effect of increased accountability and productivity in the practice room. In the last video, in addition to a 1-hour practice session, I introduced my practice process and how I reflect upon my practice. As with my last Practice With Me, I've added video chapters, so if you want to skip straight to practicing without my commentary, you can do so easily. My commentary in this video will cover a different theme. Have you ever had practice block when you found it difficult to practice your musical instrument over an extended period of time? Similar to authors who experience writer's block, this can extend to several weeks or months, with an awareness that you don't want to give up playing the musical instrument, but you struggle to immerse yourself in practice and drop into flow state. You might struggle to pick up your instrument at all, or find your phone a distraction during practice, constantly using this as an opportunity for procrastination. Simply using this video during practice might help you to address this. You will see me practicing silently, so if you watch this on your phone, it will take a conscious effort to stop the video running to browse social media, for example. Share your experiences and tips in the comments of this video so we can build a resource for anyone watching. I'll reflect on my own experience of practice block in the central part of this video, alongside providing the mirrored practice session. For the mirrored practice session itself, I want to introduce a Pomodoro timer to structure our time practicing together. I'd intended to do this in the first video, since the idea of the Practice With Me series emerged from my Study With Me videos, but I simply forgot during editing since I was distracted trying to realise the Practice With Me concept. A Pomodoro timer is a way of structuring your work on a defined task, interspersing this with regular breaks to ensure optimum concentration. The time-bound element of this method can help avoid procrastination. Rather than having several hours to potentially practice, the Pomodoro can give a sense of urgency to increase motivation and productivity. It also provides a focus for work on defined goals and provides a sense of achievement when you accomplish these. In musical instrument practice, this might not necessarily mean mastery of a technique or passage, since this might happen over several practice sessions, but instead a sense of progress towards this larger goal. In our mirrored practice session, we will work with a 40-10 Pomodoro, which means 2 40-minute practice sessions with a 10-minute break in between. I'm aware that some people might enjoy the timer, but others might find the imposed 10-minute break a distraction at a moment when they were focused on a particular task. I'd encourage you to try this out and let me know in the comments how you find this method. If you have any suggestions for preferred Pomodoro timers, then do let me know. We have a 40-minute practice session coming up, so I'd encourage you to spend a moment thinking about what you would like to achieve during this time. How do you want to break down the 40 minutes? What tasks do you want to work on? And how do you want to work on these? If you work with a teacher, you might be able to use feedback from your lesson to guide you here. I'm going to break down my 40 minutes as follows. I'm at a transitional stage currently, so my focus this week is assessing where I am with various tasks. Firstly, I'm going to make a start playing through some grade 6 scales to assess where I need further help from my teacher and what I can work on alone. I'm going to allocate 15 minutes to this task. I won't be able to cover all the scales and arpeggios, so we'll work through a small number of these in each practice session this week. I'm then going to continue to familiarise myself with the tenor clef and some of the higher positions of the cello, including thumb position. I'm going to allocate 10 minutes to this task. To complete the first Pomodoro, I'm going to spend 15 minutes working on a semi-quaver passage, which I'm using to become familiar with the practice process needed to play a fast passage. I'm doing this with the guidance of my teacher and applying some of the techniques used in the Velocity chapter of the Practice Mind book. Again, I won't have time to achieve all of these in 15 minutes, so I'll try to tackle a different technique each day. After the break, I intend to spend two 20-minute periods refamiliarising myself with two pieces by Vivaldi and Romberg to assess where I am with respect to a longer-term project to polish these. It's worth noting that during the period I was finding it difficult to practice, that I would have struggled to set focus goals during practice, as I've done here. So if you are in the middle of a practice block, I'd encourage you to pick up your instrument for these 40 minutes and simply try to enjoy playing. This might not involve practicing work set by your teacher, it could be going back to some easier repertoire you've played in the past, or simply improvising on your instrument for fun, or learning something by ear. Let's meet in the break where I'll talk about my experience of practice block and how I am overcoming this, and then you can decide whether you want to continue playing for another 40 minutes. At the very least, you'll have achieved 40 minutes of playing your instrument, and if you're able to build a habit like this, that's one aspect of the practice block addressed. With all this said, it's time to begin our first 40-minute practice session. So pick up your instrument and let's get playing. Congratulations on achieving 40 minutes of practice in the first half of the mirrored Practice With Me session. How did you find the experience of playing for 40 minutes? If you set defined goals, how much progress did you make with those? Is there anything you need to address for your next practice session? You might spend a few moments jotting down a few reflections or prompts to carry forward to your next practice session. It's time to take a break from practice. Grab a cuppa, move around, or if you're watching this video for the first time and are experiencing or have experienced a practice block, I'd invite you to stick around during the break. I'll share my own experience of this in the hope that my reflections resonate or help you in some way. And if you feel comfortable doing so, I'd encourage you to share your own experience and tips in the comments section. To give some context as to my own background, I teach the arts, including music, in a higher education setting. I have both an MA in music and an MA in education. As a music teacher, I don't specialise in performance, so I'm trying to develop this aspect of the music discipline informally. Playing the cello as an adult learner is a hobby, but I'd also regard mastering an instrument, which might have many definitions, as one of my life goals. I've been learning the cello for about 2.5 years now. For about 2 years, I progressed very quickly through the beginner stages, largely because I had discovered an effective practice method. I was consistent and I practiced for about an hour and a half each day. In doing this, I was at a stage of my playing where I was consistently working on ABRSM grade 6 level repertoire. So all was going well, until I experienced a prolonged period of illness extending over several weeks that disrupted my practice routine. After this, I found myself suffering from the dreaded practice block. I define this as a period of time where I found it very difficult to practice, but at no point did I want to give up playing the instrument. I think there are two aspects to practice block. One is to do with habit formation, or the disruption of this, and the second is psychological. I should add a brief disclaimer here that I'm an adult learner of the cello with some related degrees, but not a medical professional. So if you have any concerns about issues relating to mental health, do seek advice from a professional. The aim of this video is to open a conversation about practice and challenges we might face when learning a musical instrument. I'll talk about both aspects of practice block and introduce this in the form of what I have identified and would define as the 6 Ds of practice block. Whilst experiencing practice block, I did take a look at the Practice Mind chapters on motivation and mindset, and whilst these are excellent chapters, I felt there was only one sentence which really touched upon the challenges I was facing at the time, which was events outside the practice room disrupting focus during practice. So my 6 Ds are an attempt to break this down in a little more detail on the basis of my experience, which are ordered chronologically as I progress through my practice block. My first D relates to the initial disruption, which in my case occurred after a period of illness. And what's interesting about my experience with practice block is I can see a parallel with a disruption of focus in another part of my life several years ago. The pattern of both disruptions and the consequences of those disruptions is very similar. So my consistent habit of practice and of focus was disrupted. I perceived this as a temporary disruption, the initial absence of practice due to illness, and then a difficulty of re-establishing a routine for practice, essentially a challenge in re-establishing the habit. And I think this is related to motivation. When I began playing, I possessed low skill but high motivation, which made it easy to establish the habit and see progress. But as an intermediate player, there's more of a sense of overwhelm. I'm not learning the basic skills anymore, and there's a sense that tasks are more complex and skills are more challenging to attain. It's a bit like that tricky second album concept. My motivation is lower since I find the tasks more challenging and I feel there is more at stake. I can no longer write off mistakes as simply I'm just a beginner. At first I dismissed the impact of the disruption, and there was a sense of I'm just not feeling it this week, things will be better next week. This is where we progress to the second step. It began to occur to me after more than 1 week that a pattern of procrastination was being established. In fact, I even mentioned in my previous practice with me that I could see that I was avoiding a skill I found challenging, sound colour, with its possibility of endless choices. So instead, I focused on a technique which could be well defined. So during this time, the pattern of procrastination was becoming ingrained. I began to form and train myself in the habit of poor practice. This had 2 appearances: avoiding consistent practice, denial of the present moment, and making superficial excuses such as I'm busy doing X tonight so I don't have time to practice, or avoiding challenging tasks in practice as mentioned with the sound colour example. I was also stuck in analysis paralysis, so I was constantly trying to analyse what was going wrong, but not making much progress in identifying the cause. Often I thought I understood the cause, but it didn't seem to resolve the problem. At some point, and this might take several weeks, months, or even years, with continued reflection, I think it's possible to break this cycle and discover the core reason for the procrastination. We might define this as rock bottom, where you are faced with a reality and gain a new perspective, akin to looking at yourself from the third person. This was certainly my experience and became a turning point in addressing my practice block. What I discovered is just how much my illness had impacted my self-confidence and resilience. Once I'd identified this core reason for my practice block, I reflected on the motivation and determination I'd had at the beginning of my cello journey. I drew on this to invest in myself. I realised the only person who was profoundly impacted by my practice block was me. It was me who was not achieving one of my life goals. No one else was grieving over the loss of this but me. Having said all of this, I do want to give a shout out to my amazing teacher who went beyond the call of duty, stuck with me and never gave up believing in me through this whole experience. So I tried to draw on the determination I remembered from the start of my journey and reignite that fire in my belly to motivate a new era of my practice and accountability to myself. During my cello journey, I've predominantly been motivated by the development of my skills, but emerging from a period of procrastination, I felt that this broad aspiration was too vague and that it was important to define a clear goal or several goals for the year. Commonly, this might take the form of an exam or preparing for a performance. I felt a clear goal would give me increased accountability during practice. It also provides a defined plan for my work and practice over the next 6 to 12 months. Essentially, I'm designing my year ahead on the cello. I also decided to be more consistent in engaging with my community orchestra. I've had a tendency to feel overwhelmed with some of the harder parts of the repertoire since joining, and this has resulted in a lack of determination to attend rehearsals, come what may. Again, drawing on this idea that it's easy to make superficial excuses not to engage with something. So I have clear goals for the coming year with my practice, and I'm establishing a plan, designing my year ahead through personal reflection and with my teacher's help for how I'll achieve my goals. I'm also mindful of the value of experimentation. Expressing this as a D might be the word develop. So although I'll define a long-term plan for the year and a short-term plan for my practice week, I'll be mindful that within each practice session and tackling each task, that experimentation is a key part of learning and understanding. For example, when I get stuck on a task, rather than being dismissive, "This is too hard" or "I can't do this," experimentation can help me identify where the problem is and how I can overcome this. Sometimes I'll be able to do this on my own, and sometimes I'll need to take it to my lesson and seek advice from my teacher. I'm in the process of designing my plan for the year, and once established, I'll need to engage and deliver through consistent and focused practice. In terms of mindset, my emphasis is means of engagement and process, not perfectionism and necessarily the finished product. This might look like systematic preparation for a performance, but if the performance doesn't go to plan, using this as a learning experience, an opportunity for further development, rather than seeing this as a failure. Stacking up these experiences builds resilience, and as my teacher said, resilience is a skill you need to learn. So that's my 6 Ds of practice block. I'd be interested in hearing other people's experience of practice block and any tips and insights you've had to overcome this. Drop these in the comments, and together we can build a useful resource for any future viewers of this video. We're nearing the end of our 10-minute break. If you're suffering from practice block, I'd invite you to do one of 2 things during the second Pomodoro. You could pick up your instrument again and continue to enjoy engaging with this, in whatever form this looks like to you. As mentioned earlier, this may or may not involve engaging with tasks set during your lessons. Or you could spend time reflecting on the 6 Ds and consider how this applies to your own situation. Can you identify the cause of your practice block? Set a goal or plan for the year ahead. Or reflect on motivation for taking up your instrument and why it's important to you to continue playing this. Keep the video running to help you remain accountable in your reflections. Hopefully seeing someone else practicing will be a helpful reminder of the joy of learning a musical instrument. Whatever you choose to do during this second Pomodoro, I wish you luck in your musical journey.